الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. We'll continue inshallah ta'ala with the fiqh and the subject of the zakah. And we had just finished the zakah of al-kharij min al-ard, what comes out from the earth, which is basically with regards to the plants with the specific things that is only related to the zakah, and also al-rikaz with the treasures that are buried under the ground if someone discovers it, or minerals that also that comes out of the earth, and what's the rulings of matters of zakah in these matters. And then the fourth type of wealth that the zakah is obligatory in is zakat urud at-tijara, the zakat of urud at-tijara. So there are four types of wealth. Zakah is not upon everything. It's on specific type of wealth only, based on the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. Zakatul athman, the zakah of monetary things like money and gold and silver. That's one. And number two, the zakah of al-an'am, the cattle, livestock, camels and cows and goats and sheep. And the zakah of what comes out from the earth, with its two categories, with the specific kinds that are mentioned. And then number four is zakat urud at-tijara. And what is the meaning of urud at-tijara? At-tijara is known, trade. Tijara, trade, back and forth. There's a buyer and there's a seller. Urud at-tijara are basically the goods that are ready to be sold. The goods that are there to be sold, this is what is the meaning of urud at-tijara. Comes from al-ard, is when something is not stable, something keeps on moving, which is basically like the goods, or someone has, he's in the business of buying and selling, so he wants to get rid of what he has, and he would bring more and he get rid of it, and this is how things are with making money. So it's related specifically to matters of trade or tijara, and there are details to this, especially with how complex things are, for example, nowadays when it comes to trade and companies and things like this. But we'll take the basic matters of knowledge here in Masail for us to understand it, and that's the most important thing here, to comprehend the Masail instead of knowing the answer for some questions. Like, what do I do with the zakah in my store? Or this, you get an answer and that's the end of it. No, we're not focused on this. We're focused on understanding the basics of the Masail, to understand to perceive it in the right way, to understand it, and then the ruling is the easiest part afterwards. So what is zakat urud al-tijara? He said urud al-tijara hiya ma u'idda. So the definition of it is what has been prepared libay'in wa shira, anything that is ready to be sold or to be purchased, li'ajri ribhin, for a profit, whether it's aqar or hayawan or ta'am, whether it's a building or an animal or food or drink or machines, anything that is there, a person has to sell, and with conditions, of course. So, and that also includes the livestock. If a person has livestock, has a whole bunch, lots of cows that are with the number wise, he's supposed to give zakah on it, but he's not having it for increasing his livestock or for milk or whatever. No, he's having it to sell them. So now his zakah is not what's mentioned before. His zakah is in this category because he has it for the purpose of buying them or selling them and buying more and things like this. So it depends on what the intentions of the person, what actually he's doing. So anything that is being prepared to be sold with other conditions. عروض التجارة, here now the conditions. إذا بلغت نصابا, so it has to reach the nisab. The word nisab, we'll keep it as nisab. What does nisab means? And nisab is the threshold, is the minimum amount of money or whatever types of money that once a person hits that nisab, that means he has to give zakah, but with the other conditions to be observed, whether it's have a year passes on it and things like this. So what's the nisab of the gold, for example, as we said after, what's the nisab of gold? Don't say 85 grams of gold. What's the nisab of gold? 20 mithqal. 20 mithqal, which is nowadays it's 85 grams of gold. So this is the nisab of gold. If someone has what's worth 85 grams of gold money wise, or he has gold 85 grams or more, and then a whole year passes on it without going below the 85, then he gives the zakah on what a year passed on. All right. So this is what a nisab is. If someone has 84 or 80 grams, to be on the safe side, 60 grams of gold, and a year passes on them and did not go above that, because some said it's the 70, 85. So it's, say 60, for example, there's no zakah. He does not pay zakah. Or he has enough money, but it's not equal to the nisab yet, there's no zakah for that person to pay if he pays it based on the zakah, based on the nisab of al-dhahab. And you said what is best for the person, if when it comes to money-wise, and his money is like this, is to base his nisab based on the silver, because it's better for the poor. The nisab of the silver is like $400 or something like this. Urud al-tijara is the same thing. So to make it easy from the beginning, urud al-tijara, the nisab of urud al-tijara is like the gold and silver. It's the same nisab, value-wise. So إذا بلغت نصابا, so if these goods, someone sells car parts, if whatever he has of goods, he owns them, and he has them with him in his storage or whatever in his store, and it reached the nisab, the value of all what he has, and we'll talk about the qima or the value. So the value what he has is the nisab or more. And let's say it's based on the nisab or the fidda or the silver to make it better for the poor then. That means he has his merchandise is $400 or more. That means he has to give zakah if his business 1 year passes, and it did not go below the nisab, which we will say, for example, the 200 dirham of fidda, which is the $400 of worth of merchandise. Say for that example. So إذا بلغت نصابا وحال عليها الحول. So the nisab is the first condition. حال عليها الحول. الحول is the hijri year passes on when he started the business, or when he started to have these goods that he's selling, and it's the nisab or more, and a year passes, وجبت فيها الزكاة. The zakah is obligatory then in these goods that he's selling. وتقوم بالأحظ للفقراء. تقوم means that what is the value of these goods? What's the value of it? Because the zakah is 2.5%. So he has to go through all of the merchandise that he has, his inventory, and then after a year passes, you see how much it's worth, and then he gives from his money or from whatever he sells something from it, but he has to give 2.5% of that. But how to determine the value of it? Is it the retail price or the wholesale price? How he purchased it? How he's hoping to sell it with, or what is it? First of all, it says وَتُقَوَّمْ بِالْأَحَظِّ الْفُقَرَاء. It's to be valued in a way that would be what is best for the poor. What is best for the poor people? That means don't assume or determine the value based on you purchased it for $1, but you're hoping that you can sell it for 10. So you say it's worth $1. So the zakah will be less. And at the same time, you don't have to determine the value of it based on 10. That's what you're hoping for. What is right is what's the value of it. And a person of expertise, he would know what's the value of it, and people can determine this. And that's why it's not one set thing. A person might have purchased a lot, for example, with very cheap price. Its value is far more than what he purchased it for. So what's the value of it? What's the price that if you put on that, in this amount of, or these goods today, they would get sold today, right? And he says here what's best, and think of what's best for the poor. Because some said it's based on the wholesale price versus what's the retail price and all of these types of things. And some said it's something in between. But when it comes to what's really correct, it's the value of it that is in the market. And this is something that is known by the owner, by his experience. And if he's not sure, to make it as less or as much as he can, so that it's better for the poor. So there's the issue of determining the value of it. ويخرج ربع العشر. and to give out what's the zakah, ربع العشر, 1/4 of the tenth, which is which is the same as the gold and the silver, 2.5%. من كامل القيمة, from the entire value of what he has. And why did he say من كامل القيمة, even though it's going to be mentioned later? There's something specific here for عروض التجارة that we need to remember. In gold and silver, if you start the year with 10,000, that means after a year you have to give zakah. If it did not go below the 5,000, say the 5,000 is the nisab. So you started with 10,000, and then throughout the year, after a few months it become 20,000. After a year, how much you should or obligatory upon you to pay the zakah on? Only the 10, not the increase. The increase is not added to the asl, is not added to the original amount. You only pay what a year passes on. That's why it says it becomes very difficult for someone to determine if the money keeps going in and out. So that means the best way is to determine the day and to pay the zakah on that day, whatever the person has. This is in gold and silver. For urud al-tijara, if a person starts with, once the nisab is reached, so say his goods reaches $5,000, for example, that means after a year from now, he has to give the zakah. As long as the nisab the money or the trade or the goods did not go below the nisab, that means he has to give zakah at the end. How much should he give zakah on what? On what a year passes on? No. After a year, whatever goods he has on that day after a Hijri year, he has to give zakah on the entire merchandise. Not the things that only a year passed on it. So you might have bida'a, goods that entered his store the day before the zakah. That's included. When a person is in business, he goes in and out. So he does not have to only give the zakah on what passes a year on. No, this is mandatory. Is it clear? So once the nisab reached, and as long as the nisab did not go, or the trade or the goods did not go below the nisab, is the nisab or above. As long as that is throughout the year, then after exactly 1 year, Hijri calendar, he has to give the zakah on the entire inventory that he has after a year, on that day, on the day after the year. Not only the ones that a year passed on it. Is it clear? This is very important for urud al-tijara. So we see the examples clear. You opened your business, whether it's you have your goods at home or you have a store. Because some things are not, you don't calculate it from the zakah. Say you have a store, for example. The cashier, the furniture, the decoration, all of that, there's no zakah on it. Only the things that you're selling. Of course, it has to be halal. The haram, there's no zakah for it because a person has to get rid of it. So he's selling halal stuff, candy, right? Or anything. He started with what the merchandise was worth $10,000. And then after a year, on that one day specifically, he started in the first day of Ramadan. The next Ramadan, on first of Ramadan, his the money or the trade, the things that are ready to be sold in his store is equal to $100,000 worth. The zakah is on what? 100,000. Even if that whole bunch of goods came to him the day before. The 29th of Sha'ban, he purchased goods, candy to sell with $90,000. He has to pay zakah on it. So it's after and the hiyal or playing tricks is haram, and a person is to be treated against his or opposite to his intentions. So going back, so he says ويخرج ربع العشر, 1/4 of the tenth, from the entire من كامل القيمة, from all what the goods or the merchandise is worth. And then he says ويجوز إخراج زكاة العروض ربع العشر من العروض نفسها. It's permissible to pay the 1/4 of the tenth, which is 2.5%, from the goods itself. So you can pay cash, or you can take out what's equal to 2.5%, and you give that away as the zakah. You have the option. So the person says يجوز. So when the question comes, what is the hukm of giving out the zakah of the merchandise from the merchandise itself? The hukm is it's jaiz, يجوز. Okay? So either to pay it cash or to pay it from the goods itself, to give some of the goods itself. The same thing with the gold. If someone has gold and a year passes and it's over the nisab, either to take some of the gold and to give it away, which is what's equal to 2.5%, or to give from your out of your pocket money the zakah, and that's sufficient. Then the next one, إن نوى بعروض التجارة الاقتناء لا التجارة فلا زكاة فيها. إن نوى, if the person have the intention with all of these goods that he have, that his intention is to own it and not to sell it, there's no zakah in it. So his niyyah might change. He started a business and he has things that is ready to be sold. And then after a few months, he decided that he's going to just keep it for himself. He purchased a car to sell it. He wants to buy and sell cars. So he purchased 2 cars, right? And then after a few months, it's not worth it to sell it, so I'll keep it for myself. So that means no zakah for it. Even if it's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, yes. But again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows what's in the heart. So this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He knows what's in the heart of the person, but ta'arud al-tijara is according to one's intentions. Then he says نتاج السائمة وربح التجارة حولهما حول أصلهما إن كان نصاب. 2 things that are نتاج السائمة and ربح التجارة. What's in the English? It says نتاج السائمة, the offsprings of the livestock. Does it say anything about it? The offsprings, you start the nisab with the sheep. For example, it was 40. Then throughout the year, gave birth. So whatever comes as the birth, at the end of the year, you count these offsprings as part of your nisab. You don't say a year didn't pass on this. Anything that is given birth, it's to be added to the asl, to the original number when the nisab is reached. Clear? This is with the cattle, the livestock. And the same thing with ربح التجار. The same thing with the profits of the tijar. The profits of the trade is the same thing. He says حولهما حول أصلهما. This is how the mas'ala in Arabic, the hawl of it, the year of it, is around or about its original nisab. In kana nisaban, if it was nisab. When it says حولهما, that means you know that the hawl is the year. So when they say the hawl of the offsprings of the livestock and the hawl, which is supposed to be the year, the hawl of the profits of the trade, right, is what is according to the original. It's added to the original one. Clear? So this year, it is not significant here for the nitaj al-sa'ima, the offspring of the livestock, or the profits of the trade. It doesn't matter if it's increased on the way. After a year, once it reached the nisab, as long as it did not go below the nisab. After a year, whatever animals you have to give on that day the zakah based on the number that you have on that day after a year. And the same thing with the profits of the tijar. Even if it's cash money. Is it clear? Yeah, if it goes below the nisab any time throughout the year, there's no zakah. Then you stop calculating there's no zakah. If it goes to the nisab, then there is a zakah after a year. The zakah you're going to give it after a year. But how much you give after the year is what's present after the year. On that particular day that is corresponding to the year from when the nisab is reached. Okay. Do we need a board? Or it's a... Right. Right. Yes. That's a zakah. Yes. The only 2. Because cash money and gold and silver, you don't treat it like that way. Only the 2 cases of as-sa'ima, the livestock, and the tijara or the trade. Anything that is increased during the year and it stayed till the end of the year. So what matters is after the year. Whatever a person has after the year, whether he purchased it or it gives offspring, whatever there is, he has to give zakah on it.
Just to clarify that. So let's say if the nisab is 5,000, and then somebody gives to maybe 2,000 within that year, but by the end of the Hijri year, he's back up to that's 5,000. Is that?
He started the nisab with 5,000, right? And after he started calculating the year, then after 6 months, it went down to 2,000. So no calculation anymore. He stops. There's nothing. And then after another 2-3 months, it rose up to 5,000 again. Now I need to pay attention to that date. I wait for an entire year that the nisab never went below. It did not go below the nisab for an entire year. So once it goes below the nisab anytime in the year, you just no calculations anymore. Because the nisab has to be there or above an entire year. For the gold and silver, if you want to be very precise, you only pay what passes a year on. For the livestock and the trade, after a year, as long as it did not go below the nisab, the day after the year, you have to pay all of what you have today. Is it clear? Fine. Of course, there's so many different, this is what is mentioned here. And there's so many different things, for example, for the trade, what counts and what not counts, and the value and all of these types of things. But again, it's very precise and very clear that it's urud al-tijara is what is ready to be sold. And that some of the issues comes, I just want to mention one example. That's why we always have to ask the people of knowledge. If someone has a factory, the machines, of course, there's no zakah on it. The whatever, all of the expenses in the factory, there's nothing there. But the issue comes in place. Say he purchased mawad kham, raw material, and he manufactures them, and he has a product, right? So the product is ready to be sold, and the raw material also, does he pay zakah on it or not? Because the raw material in reality is going to be a final product. So it's part of what is ready to be sold. So there's the fatwa of the ulama, yes, but then he needs an accountant. Because does he have raw material all year long? And actually not just that. It's added to the final product, and as long as you have it for a year and it's ready to be sold. But if the factory raw material comes product, then there's no inventory, everything is sold, then he's making money. The zakah will get him. I mean, no worries, but in a different way, money wise. But as long as there's inventory ready to be sold, there's zakah on it, and the raw material is also calculated in this. No.
Not to get too complex, but that's a good example. So if you have the raw material, and then when in the final product, there's going to be wastage, right? Like if you're designing something like this, pick out
all of that is to be calculated on whatever is estimated that it's going to be part of the final product. Yeah, yes. No. And also you minus out the debt, and you add the money that you owe people. All of these things are in the equation. So, for example, if you have business at the end of the year, what is the cash money that you have? Plus, what's the goods that are ready to be sold is how much? Minus the debt that you're supposed to give to, for example, the sources that bring you goods, for example, and you add to it the money that you're supposed to collect from the customers or whatever. All of that is together. No.
Very common these days now. That's what makes it very common. Let's say you buy raw material for $1 million, but you're not buying it. They put for 0%, of course. They say, and that's part of the contract that the company provides you. For instance, in my instance, I'm talking about chemotherapy. They give you 1 million. And then within 1 month, you bill the patient or the insurance, and you get actually your profit is $100 out of that, and you give them back the 1 million, you just get $100. So at the end of the year, if you have $1 million worth of inventory, but your profit, and eventually when you're selling it, you just get a very low amount, and that never belonged to you. Meaning it was 1 million given by them, and you return the million. So that's not part of this.
So is there inventory?
There is inventory. Chemotherapy is inventory.
Right.
But it's not like you have that money. You don't own it. The company is providing it, and they will take the money back for that 1 month later.
So you're not owning it and selling it. You're having it and you're using it, and then you give them. Right. Actually, the contract has to be checked. Like, what's exactly the relationship between you and the company or the factory, for example? Are you
like you're responsible, but you have been in the contract saying after 1 month I'll give you back that 1 million.
okay? It's difficult to rush into giving a verdict now, but it's when it comes to these types of contracts, of course, it has to be very clear what is the nature between the two parties. So either he's selling it for them or he's owning it. That means, for example, if they send these materials and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbid the place is burned, for example, who's responsible? The person is responsible. So that means he's purchasing it completely.
They're just getting pay us back in 1 month because we're buying that product.
Right.
They're just saying pay us back in 1 month, no matter what they auction the house and take it.
Right. So this is something that is worth, and if it's after the year, and if it's still present with him, there's a zakat to be paid on the.
This is such a big amount, and it's $2 profit. Like the end of the year doesn't have that.
But it's the same thing if someone has some goods and it's a lot of goods, but then at the end, and he's selling them for a short profit, and it's still there with him. This is worth money. Oh, if it's that, yeah, you subtract the debt. Yeah. So if it's a debt, you subtract the debt, and if there's money that you owe to people, then you add this. Yeah. So it's if it's a debt, you subtract it. So at the end of we're going to be the same. No. Let's continue, inshallah. And at the end, if there's any. So this is the only masail that is mentioned in zakat urud at-tijara. So as long as it reaches the nisab and the year passes, the zakat on it, and then it's to be given 1/4 of the 10th from the entire value of things after the year. And if the niyyah changes, then there's no zakat, and the ribh, as we said, the profit is added. Then after that, he mentions the next subject is shurut wujub az-zakah, the conditions for the zakat to be obligatory. As we mentioned before, that the zakat is upon zakat al-mal. It's called zakat al-mal. The zakat is upon the wealth, not necessarily the individual. If there's the wealth, then the zakat is upon it, whether it's a child or grown-ups, different than other obligatory things in the deen, like the salah, for example. So تجب الزكاة على كل حر. Zakah is obligatory upon every hur. Hur means a free person, not a slave. Slave, he does not own anything. على كل حر Muslim, the only Muslim. The non-Muslim has no zakah on him. There's something else. مالك للنصاب, he's the owner of the nisab. He owns the nisab. As we said, the nisab is a condition. Here, a condition that is number 4 that was not mentioned before. He says ملكا مستقلا. مستقلا ولا مستقرا? Maybe this is a typo. مستقرا, Allah أعلم, I have it. Maybe it's the mulk has to be mustaqir. Mustaqir means it's a steady ownership. It's not an uncertain ownership. He has to own it fully. And they give the example of that if someone is doing mudaraba or something like investment and things like this. He does not have the ownership of it, or it can be taken away from the person anytime. So he has to have full ownership of the goods or the money or whatever there is. Otherwise, there's no zakah on it. And that's what it comes to the issue. If someone, say for example, there's money for him, but he doesn't have it. He does not have full ownership over it. It's say for example, it's in the hands of someone else and they won't give it to him. There's no zakah on it till he receives it. It has to be, the mulk has to be مستقر, well established. وحال عليه الحول, number 5, and the year passes on it. في غير المعشر والركاز, in other than المعشر, which is what is given the zakah as 1/10. I'm sorry, which is the 10%, which is the plants. The zakah of the plants, it doesn't have to pass a year on it. It's in the time of harvesting. And al-rikaz, and the same thing with al-rikaz, it's when it comes out. These are the two. There's no hawl, there's no year for it. It's when in the day of harvesting and in the day when this is discovered. So these are the conditions. Upon every free Muslim, owner of the nisab, and the ownership is there, is the real ownership, and the year passes, and when it comes to the year passing, except the plants where it's harvested, and this is when it's to be given the zakah and the treasures. Clear with the conditions? إخراج الزكاة, to give the zakah out. وقت إخراج الزكاة, when is the time to give the zakah, when it's obligatory to pay the zakah. يجب إخراج الزكاة فورا, the zakah is obligatory immediately. That means it's not permissible to be delayed. Once it's an obligation, then it's not permissible to be delayed. So the nisab reached in the 1st of Ramadan, the next 1st of Ramadan he's supposed to give zakah. The 2nd of Ramadan, it's haram for him because he delayed it for one day. It has to be done immediately or before. Before it's fine, but it is not permissible to be delayed. كالنذور والكفارة, like the nadhr, when a person makes a vow on a specific date or specific way, it's not permissible to delay it. And the same thing, the kafara. لأن الأمر المطلق للفوري, because the command is to be done immediately. ومنه آتوا الزكاة, give the zakah. Then there's an exception here. وله أن يؤخرها لزمن الحاجة ولقريب وجار. It is permissible to delay it if there is a need. He does not find someone to give him the zakah, or there's a dire need that is coming up, that he wants to wait for it, or to a relative that he's coming, for example, the next day, and he's poor, or a neighbor. So things like that, if a person thinks that there might be exception for him, he needs to ask a person of knowledge. Is it really a needy situation or not? Sometimes a person would take the zakah out, but he doesn't find a poor person to give it to him. So as long as he takes it out of his wealth, and that does not belong to him anymore. That's a huge responsibility also for institutions or masajid that collect the zakah from the people. So there are many masajid. They collect the zakah and the zakah stays with them. It has to reach the poor. So unless they don't find anyone, that's a different situation. But it has to be distributed right away. You see, I can imagine that since the zakah is the responsibility of the authority, imagine how in the days when they would collect the zakah, it does not stay. This is different than other sources of income for the government or so. The zakah has to be collected from the people, and it goes to the poor immediately. This is a very important reason here, or a point here. حكم منعها, what's the ruling of preventing or not giving the zakah? Two things. من جحد وجوب الزكاة, whoever denies that the zakah is obligatory, علما, knowing that this is an obligation as is clearly stated in the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, one of the pillars of Islam, kafar. He's a disbeliever, even if he gives the zakah. Even they come and take the zakah from him, he's a disbeliever, because he's denying what's already known by necessity in the Quran and the Sunnah. He says the zakah is not obligatory. لتكذيبه لله ورسوله وإجماع الأمة, and because he's denying what is clearly stated in the Quran and the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the consensus of the Ummah. يستتابوا فإن تابوا إلا قتل. The people of authority, they would ask him to repent, and if he doesn't, then the capital punishment is to be applied on him by the people of authority, because he's a disbeliever. ومن منعها بخلا, and whoever does not give the zakah out of greed, وتهاونا, or doesn't care, lazy, أخذت منه, he's not a disbeliever, but he's committing a major sin. It's to be taken from him by the people of authority. وعزر. Uzr, that means is to be punished. With whatever the authorities they would put as a punishment for the one that does not give the zakah. Whether it's to be imprisoned or to be taken more money from him or whatever there is. Irtikabi muharraman, because he committed a sin, and especially that basically he is stealing the money of the poor. Imagine someone going to the money that is ready to be given in sadaqah and he steals from it. What would the government do to that person? This is exactly what the person when he does not give his zakah, because that's not his money. The zakah money is not one's money, it's the money of the poor. Money of one of the 8 categories of the zakah. It does not belong to him. He has no right to it whatsoever. So this is the ruling of al-man'. So we have to know whether a person, he's not given the zakah out of disbelief or just being sinful. And the punishment for the sinful is to be taken from him by the people of authority, and they have the right by the judge to punish him. يخرج عن الصغير والمجنون وليهما. The young and the insane, their wali, their guardian, is to give the zakah from their wealth. So if someone is young and he has inherited lots of wealth, the zakah needs to be also taken out from his wealth by the guardian. And the same thing if someone is majnoon, someone that is insane. One last point is what's mustahab ما يسن عند إخراجها. What's recommended when a person is giving the zakah. Number 1, there are 4 sunan or 4 mustahabbat that are mentioned here. Number 1, يسن إظهارها. يسن in fiqh, that means it's recommended to show it, to show that a person is given his zakah, which is opposite to what a person, the good deeds you need to hide it for ikhlas, for sincerity. But for the zakah, it's recommended to show that a person is given the zakah لِتَنْتَفِي عَنْهُ التُّهْمَةِ. One of the wisdom behind it, so that people do not accuse him of withholding the zakah. Right? Because if people know that someone is rich and he has money, and they don't see that he's giving zakah, they might, have bad thoughts of him, or he's not giving his zakah, things like this. So it doesn't have to be like he has to make an advertisement that I gave my zakah today, but it's not something that he has to make sure that it's hidden. It doesn't have to be like how much zakah did he pay, but it's recommended. It's not obligatory thing, so that he give the zakah. Number 2, أن يفرقها بنفسه. It's recommended that he distributed himself to make sure that it reaches those who deserve it. It's recommended. It's not a must, but it's recommended that the person giving the zakah, to make sure that it reaches the poor by himself. This is an act of worship and a good deed. Number 3, أن يقول عند دفعها, that he says when he pays the zakah, اللهم اجعلها مغنما ولا تجعلها مغرما, which means, oh Allah, make it maghnaman. Maghnaman, gain, like the booty of the war or gain, and not to make it maghraman. Don't make it as if it's a penalty or waste. That means he's asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to increase his wealth. And as zakah actually is increasing, not decreasing. This dua is based on a hadith. The hadith is weak. The hadith is weak, but there's nothing wrong with someone. As the ulama mentioned in fiqh, dua is okay. But not to believe that the Prophet ﷺ said this. But it's in a weak hadith. Allahumma ja'alha maghnaman wa la taj'alha maghraman. Number 4, yusannu an yaqul al-akhir. It's recommended for the akhir, for the one that is taking the zakah, the poor person. It's recommended that he would say to the one that is giving, أجرك الله فيما أعطيت. May Allah give you the reward of what you gave. بارك لك فيما أبقيت وجعله لك طهورا. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless what you left with you, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it pure for you. Or anything. And also this specific dua is like that is weak. And the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, he said, Allahumma salli ala Ali Awfa, which is, oh Allah, salli, that means praise the people of Awfa because they give when they give charity. So you would say that to those who would give charity. You can say for that if someone, for example, giving zakah, Allahumma salli ala Ali مثلا Muhammad or Ahmad, it doesn't have to be the Prophet. I'm talking about the individual that is given zakah. His name is, for example, any name, choose a name, Mahmoud, right? So the person can say, Allahumma salli ala Ali Mahmoud, Mahmoud and his family, which means, oh Allah, praise him, and things like this. Well, actually, it's 5. The 5th sunnah here, يسن دفعها إلى الفقراء والأقارب الذين لا تلزمه مؤونتهم. It's recommended to give it to the poor and the relatives that is not obligatory upon the giver to spend on them. So you have a relative that it's not obligatory upon you to spend on them. Like the zakah cannot be given to your son. You cannot give your zakah to your poor son, because your son, you have to spend money on your son. But if you have a relative that his nafaqah or his expenses is not obligatory upon you, then and he's poor, of course the relative has more rights than the one that is far away. So this is what is recommended. And the same thing for the fuqara al-aqarib, the poor that are relatives, that are not obligatory upon the person to spend. The issue with the zakah, the asl or the origin of this mas'ala, that you're not supposed to benefit from the zakah on a personal level. Meaning you already, because the obligation means not by the shara, not by the deen only. Say, for example, it's already upon you that you're spending money on your aunt, your poor aunt. It happened that you're the one that in the family that is spending on her. Right? Anyway, you're spending on her. So can you give her from the zakah? Originally, yes, because she's not someone that is obligatory upon you to spend on her. But some said, since you're going to pay her anyway, so you should not give her from the zakah. But what is correct is that you can give her from the zakah. But say something else, and this is tricky. If someone hires people to work for him and they're poor, can he give them from his zakah? The tricky part here is if he gives them from the zakah, they probably work harder for him. So he will benefit as a result of giving them zakah. So a person has to stay away from that. So anything that makes the person benefit from the zakah, it is not permissible. So the last point was yusannu daf'uha. It's recommended to give it to the poor relatives, that it's not obligatory upon the person to provide for them. So these are the 5 recommended things: to show it, to distribute it himself, to say the dua when the person is spending it, for the one that's taken also to make dua, and it's recommended to give it to the relatives that are poor. Anything, inshallah? Let's take the hadith quickly, and then if you have any questions, inshallah. The hadith is 124. Hadith number 124. I'm sorry that the numbers we're going all over the place because it's different subjects together. So, but maybe we should go in order, inshallah. The famous hadith that we should, inshallah ta'ala, memorize it. 124, inshallah. You guys there? .24. Okay. You ready? طيب. عن تميم الداري رضي الله عنه أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال: الدين النصيحة. الدين النصيحة. الدين النصيحة. 3 means 3 times. Say 3. قلنا لمن يا رسول الله؟ قال: لله ولكتابه ولرسوله ولأئمة المسلمين وعامتهم. لله ولرسوله، لله ولكتابه ولرسوله ولأئمة المسلمين وعامتهم. سيجين عن تميم الداري رضي الله عنه أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال: الدين النصيحة. ثلاثة. قلنا: لمن يا رسول الله؟ قال: لله ولكتابه ولرسوله ولأئمة المسلمين وعامتهم. وعامتهم. So here the Prophet ﷺ, he said, الدين النصيحة. الدين is النصيحة. النصيحة is it's defined as اهتمام القلب للمنصوح له. The concern of the heart towards the subject of the nasiha. So it's not advice. It's not translated as the deen is to give advice. It's a deed, and nasiha is a deed done by the heart when the person has all good intentions and concern and things like that towards what the nasiha is supposed to be given to. So they, from nasah al-laban, that the milk when it's purified. So it comes into the meaning of having a pure heart towards someone or towards whatever the subject of the nasiha. So they said, to who, O Messenger of Allah? To who should be the nasiha? Since the entire deen is upon a nasiha, he said to Allah, وَلِكِتَابِ, and to the book of Allah, and to the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and to the leaders of the Muslims, وَعَمَّتِهِمْ, and to the masses of the Muslims. So the meaning of nasiha lillah, how can you give nasiha to Allah? Meaning that your heart is full of the importance and the purity in it, that how to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the most perfect way, to worship Him alone, to know Him with His names and attributes, to be obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the nasiha to Allah. That your heart is pure towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with the rights of Allah upon you to be fulfilled. وَلِكِتَابِهِ, and to the book of Allah, that your heart is full of that concern in a good way. How can I go about the rights of the Quran upon me? How can I learn it? How can I act upon it? How can I memorize it? If I can, how to recite it? You're occupied with this, the Quran. I need to fulfill all of the rights that is upon the ummah when it comes to the Quran. Regardless whether it's recommended or it's an obligation, a person should do the best he can with that concern. وَلِرَسُولِهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ, the rights of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the heart is there. And again, an-nasiha is what's in the heart that shows in one's physical actions. So the heart is, how can I believe in the Prophet ﷺ in the right way? How can I follow the Prophet ﷺ in the most perfect way? What is the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ so I can follow it in my aqidah, in my salah, in my ibadah, in the rulings that we learn, akhlaq, manners. What is the way the Prophet ﷺ? You're occupied with this. وَلِيَئِمَّةِ الْمُسْلِمِينَ, the leaders of the Muslimin. You have the nasiha towards them. Because if the the leaders of the Muslims are corrupt, then all kinds of evil happens. So the nasiha towards them is what? Is to make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide them, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make them the best to the ummah, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give them the bitana salihah, the right closest advisors for them to advise them to do what is good, to push away from them those who would advise them to do evil, like this. And part of the nasiha also is not to revolt against them, not to throw them out of power, with all other rulings, as we know, whether it's with speech and actions, because this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us. And stay away from reason and all of these things. We have wahy that we need to follow. إِلَّا أَن تَرَوْا كُفْرًا بَوَاحًا, as the Prophet ﷺ said, the rulings of to deal with the rulers, even if they are wrongdoers and oppressors, and all of this is to listen and obey in ma'ruf, in matters of goodness, and not to obey in sins. No obedience to anyone when they command you to commit a sin, and to enjoin good and forbid evil, but not to forbid or to talk about them in a negative way, even in front of the people, because this causes all kinds of evil things. And the Prophet ﷺ forbade us from this. and other things. So these are the rights that needs to be observed towards them. And if a person has the means to go to them face to face, and then he would advise them, tell them to fear Allah, this is that. And even if he's killed in that case, he's a shaheed, he's a martyr, he's one of the best shuhada, but not from a distance or the manabir or all these types of things that the ways of the Khawarij they do. So لأئمة المسلمين, the concern towards them. And as some of the narrations is of the Prophet ﷺ, شرار أئمتكم, the worst of your leaders, الذين تلعنونهم ويلعنون, those who you curse them and they curse you. This is the worst. And the best of them is the ones that you praise them and they praise you. So anyway, so وعمتهم, and the masses of the Muslims, the concern towards the ummah, and this is a duty. And with whatever a person means that he has. If someone has the mean, if a person of authority is different than someone that is from the common people, and the responsibility upon the people of authority is different than the responsibility of the common Muslim. And that's why those who are, for example, they have nothing but to make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then they have to have that nasiha, and they seek help from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and repent to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and help in whatever means that is permissible. So this is the hadith of an-nasiha.